Hey, everybody. This is a fantastic day, 1 week before the Academy Awards. I have someone I've admired for a good chunk of my life, and I tell you how I came to meet him. Uh, what happened was I read about you, David, in Fortune about the New Amsterdam Theater, and I was the newly hired economic
Right.
advisor for Elihu Harris, and I thought I got to call this man. So I bound up cold calling you, essentially, as they say. And I remember you said to me, "Give me a pitch. Okay, why should I be here?" And I told you about Uptown and the throughput traffic and all that. And you said, "Okay, look, I'm working on the new home for the Academy Awards. If it doesn't happen, let's talk." Well, it did happen.
Yeah.
It did
Yeah.
happen. Right, right, right.
Right.
But today, and I want to play this video real quick because it encapsulates. This goes back to this is my first year covering the Oscars. This is 9 years ago, longer than around that time. But
right behind, see that? Standing right behind, see that there? That is the Dolby Theater, and this stretch behind me on Oscar Sunday usually has the red carpet covering it. So this entire street right here behind me is closed off on Oscar Sunday, and all of this over here, right behind me, is transformed into Oscar red carpet city all along here. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to go walking. Right, look at this here. See that?
Grand entrance.
And then what we're going to do is going to walk through here as we normally would. For Oscar Sunday, all this is right here. Everything else is red. It's the red carpet, right? This is how it normally looks when there's no Oscars and you don't have. I can see one here.
I'm going to stop it right there because all that and more we're going to get to is created by you. And what captures me about you, David Malmuth, and I will talk about your history, is how perfectly it works. But David Malmuth is the developer, David Malmuth Development LLC out of San Diego. And David's known for a number of internationally known tentpole projects. I mentioned New Amsterdam Theater, Times Square, and then, of course, when you were with Trizic Hahn, that was the Trizic Hahn, and you're working with the Disney, and then as the Disney development, you then turn your focus to the Oscars.
All right.
And
Yeah. Holllywood and Highland actually started when I was at Walt Disney Company.
how did that
And it
come
was,
about?
well, it was a direct outgrowth actually of the New Amsterdam. I'd been working on the New Amsterdam for about 3 years. I'm from LA,
Yeah.
right? And I had a friend, a guy named Howard Samuels, who was doing a project on Hollywood Boulevard. And he saw what we were doing with the new AM. He said, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing something on Hollywood Boulevard?" I said, "Gosh, I know the Boulevard very well. I used to visit as I was a kid. I'd go, to the Grauman's Chinese and watch the latest James Bond movie." He said, "Well, I think there's a chance for this Boulevard to take a turn, but it needs a major player to come in." And this was 1995, and it was just at that time that Mel Simon, who had been trying to develop the corner of Holllywood and Highland next to the Chinese, that his deal fell apart. So I thought, well, this seems like an opportune time. So I started nosing around a little bit and found out that, in fact, Simon had decided they weren't going to proceed, and began to explore the potential of Disney stepping in and doing a major development. And fortunately for me, the company had already invested across the street at the El Capitan, so they were already on the boulevard with the film division. And my thought was to create, similar to what we were doing on 42nd Street, is to create a place where there would be a theater, where there would be a Disney store. And at that time at Disney, there were a number of other entertainment businesses that were being incubated. So it seemed like a great opportunity to put those out into the world. And we were three-dimensionalizing some of our intellectual property, and a lot of the other studios were doing it too. So I just had this very, very strong sense that with the right combination of entertainment players, could be brought to bear to turn Hollywood Boulevard into the thing everybody wanted it to be, which was a sort of realization of people's dream of what the real Hollywood looks and feels like. And obviously it wasn't that. It's still not that, in my opinion. It was a long way to go. But back then, this was nearly 30 years ago now. It was a dream of disappointment. That was really, the payoff was so thin that it just felt to me that as an Angelino, there was, something I could do. And because of my experience on 42nd Street, I was sort of uniquely positioned to be able to do it.
What was the thinking going in? You said home. Because I remember you said to me that the home of the Academy Awards, and that stood out among anything else. Yeah. But it's like it was even more than that. What was the real focus going in?
Well, the idea was to try to three-dimensionalize Hollywood, is to make something physically that would pay off people's expectations of what they would want when they come to Hollywood. The Chinese theater is.
You did it. You did that.
Well, it was a start. Thank you. It's a start. No one project can ever do that completely. But what we were trying to do was to create something that would inspire people to not just do T-shirt shops and just sort of lowest common denominator stuff. To try to do something that had a real authentic feel, like it was connected to Hollywood in a meaningful way. So we actually, when I was with Disney, we explored the potential of bringing Oscar back to Hollywood Boulevard, because it started right across the street at the El Capitan. And I had a conversation with them, and they said, well, we love what you're doing, but we can't be involved if Disney's involved, because that would violate our number one principle, which is that we're Switzerland. We're not associated with any of the studios, and can't be associated with any of the studios, because all of the studios are producing product, and we have to be seen as being totally fair and even-handed. I said, okay, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So at that time, in that iteration of the project, we were going to create a premier movie house, really sort of the state of the art, the Chinese theater, but fast forward 90 years, and the one that every director in town would want to premiere their film. But for a number of reasons, Disney decided they didn't want to proceed with the project. Mike Eisner felt that it was risky. He was right. That it was urban development, which is inherently risky, and that it would put a big target on Disney's back to be involved in something that is by its nature contentious and controversial. So after we had spent about a year framing the project and talking to Jackie Goldberg, who was councilperson, and talking to other leaders in town, people at Paramount, we put the project on ice. And that was in 96. That was in April of 96. And so when that happened, I decided that I was going to leave Walt Disney Company because I really wanted to do the project. So I left Disney in June of 96 and ended up joining Trizicon, who you mentioned. And one of the reasons was that Trizicon was willing to continue to pursue the project. So after the project had been on ice for about 6 months, I came back, and I went back to Jackie Goldberg, and I went back to some of the leaders in Hollywood and said, well, I got a business card, but I still have the same intention, which is to try to create something here that really becomes an extraordinary sort of three-dimensionalized version of Hollywood, place that pays off people's dreams and expectations. So I was welcomed with open arms. It was wonderful. Now at that time, the MTA was building the metro stop at the corner of Holllywood and Highland. So there was enormous urgency to try to figure out what the project was going to be up above, because you had to dovetail the construction of the above grade with the metro stop. So what happened was that the Community Redevelopment Agency, which owned most of the site, put together an RFP along with the MTA. So there were two public entities, and Trizicon responded with a kind of an updated version of the plan that we had created when I was at Walt Disney Company, and we were ultimately selected. And once we were selected, we then went back to the Academy and said, hey, good news. We're now involved in doing this project, but we're not affiliated with any of the studios. We're doing this as a private developer. And they said, fantastic. That's great news. Let's talk. So that was at the beginning, probably March of 97. And then we had an agreement in principle with them about a year later, and then moved forward to build theater, which was then ultimately called the Kodak Theater, because they were the first sponsor for the theater. Never imagining in a million years that they'd end up going bankrupt. And
yeah, wow, yeah.
Shows how fast the world changes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we redesigned the project that included the theater and a couple 100,000 square feet of retail entertainment. And we also not only ended up buying the property from the MTA and the CRA, but we ended up buying the hotel from the Simon Company. They owned the old Holiday Inn because we decided we wanted to fold that in to the project. So it became a very large, complicated mixed use with hotel, with retail, with entertainment. And then ultimately, we decided we wanted to build the Governor's Ballroom, which is where the big party is held after the Oscar show.
Oh. And so Lowe's is the hotel now, right? Where it's cool.
Yeah, right. It's now the Lowe's, right? But it was a Renaissance for
Right.
And then it became Lowe's. Yeah, and that's been very, very successful, and one of the great places to stay in Hollywood. And and that project and the Lowe's has lifted up its surrounding uses, and now the Roosevelt is a fabulous hotel, and it's got a great jazz night, and so. Following the completion of Holllywood and Highland in late in December of 2001, there's been about $2 billion of investment that's happened in and around that area. So, to me, that's always one of the measuring sticks for the success of a real estate project. Does it inspire other high quality development? So it inspired a lot of development at Holllywood and Highland, and a lot of Holllywood and Vine too, where they built the W Hotel, and there's been a lot of really wonderful development that's happened along Vine, and then that's migrated along Sunset Boulevard. So the last 20 years has really been pretty extraordinary in Hollywood, and never would have guessed it, but the studios have come back. Right now, there's 2 million square feet of studio space.
Yeah.
So content creation is once again one of the hallmarks of Hollywood. It's not just Paramount, it's Netflix, it's NBC, it's Technicolor, it's Paramount. There's a lot of really exciting creative energy that has sort of revitalized Hollywood. That and 10,000 residential units. So, I always suspected that there would be more residential development happening because it's very centrally located. And then, with all of the investment that was happening in transit, it seemed like a natural. Particularly when a lot of creatives were moving from the west side to the east side. That's been happening over the last 2 decades too. My son's a writer and writes for network comedy. He and his cohort don't want to be on the west side. He is in Angelino Heights. He's near downtown because it's very diverse, and prices obviously were better. They've gone up since he bought a number of years ago, but it has a vibe that feels, I guess, to that younger cohort of creatives better than, being more sort of on the west side and, what typically has been thought of as where Hollywood lives.
Is that leading to the comment that you said that it feels, you didn't say it felt incomplete, but it sounded like it was incomplete from your comment initially. Can you expand on that?
Well, Hollywood's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Right? There's, my opinion, the Boulevard is still not what it should be.
I agree. Right?
And I think there's so much room for improvement there. There's a lot of ownership of people who are not, they're not here. They're not in LA. They don't, they're not deeply invested in the Boulevard. They are fine with their investment and making small improvements, but that their tenants are doing well, but they don't feel any great need to try to upgrade the quality of the tenant, because that would mean they'd have to spend more money on TIs. And, for some of these owners, that's not what they're interested in. So, and there's been, as multiple plans for the improvement of the public spaces along the Boulevard, but for whatever reason, it's just never gotten there. There is some funding now to do some improvements in the public realm, which desperately needs to happen. And, my experience has been when there's a real partnership and the public realm is invested, that means that the private sector is going to step up too. But you can't expect the private side to do all of the improvements. A lot of the lift has to be done by the public side if you really want to see dramatic improvements. And I think Hollywood is a place where there could be a very significant investment in the public realm, and it would pay off multiple times with private investment.
Do you think some of that has to do with when Jerry Brown killed redevelopment in California?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's super hard to figure out how to fund public improvements right now. I experienced that on Hollywood Boulevard. I experienced it big time when I did this project in San Diego called Idea District, which was premised really on the public improvements being done through tax increment.
Yeah.
Because we were going to create a very, very significant tax increment, and we expected that to be put into parks and other public infrastructure.
Right.
And 2 years into it,
And
as you remember, it was gone, right? So there were no tools to be able to capture the increment, and hence no really good tools for cities to find the dollars that were necessary to jumpstart public infrastructure.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'll take a little spin in that direction and come back. But there's a piece of legislation that came on the books. It was September 15th of 2015 that Jerry signed into law, AB 628, SB 628 Beal. And that was, we called the son of redevelopment. And there have been since 4 different types of legislation around something called enhanced infrastructure financing district, which you have this, right? But David, all of this, only 9 California cities actually use it. 9.
The EIFD tool, yeah, because it's challenging to figure out how to actually make it work in practice. It's kind of nice in theory, but maybe it was intended to be redevelopment light. It's not turned out to be that. And I was very discouraged when redevelopment was wiped out. It was sort of a series of bad decisions that caused it to be entirely wiped out, right? Some of them by people that were representing redevelopment agencies, unfortunately.
Yes.
As you recall. So I'm not sure Brown really wanted to do away with it completely, but he wanted to capture, understandably, the state was underwater. He was looking for other funding sources. And redevelopment was a very handy tool to be able to plug some of those gaps. But it had, and it was cynical too, because he used it in Oakland very successfully.
We did. Right? I wanted Gene Kwan, our mayor, then to go. I said, hey, look, you don't go to jail, I'll go to jail for it. Somebody's got to save it. We're gonna be in massive trouble. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But today, what bothers me, and this comes back to what's going on in Hollywood and everything else, is I've done tax increment financing calculations since 1987. That's why I was hired by the city. They taught me. That's what I did. But what bothers me is that now, today, in the old redevelopment, you could not target your assessed value. Okay, you had to go through these blight studies. The new one, you don't do any of that stuff, and yet it's like, hey, get out of the mud. Let's use this thing. And that's what bothers me. Like with Holllywood, I stayed 7 blocks from the Oscars. It turned out the seedy hotel that I thought was better than it was. And I looked around the neighborhood. I thought, what the heck is going on that it didn't flow down this way? And it's just 7 blocks. Now, you know what I mean? And so maybe the sphere of influence needs to be better. But I just think for some particular reason, the newer generation of people that we're hiring to work on staff, they don't embrace tax increment finance. They do the calculations to figure out how it works. And I hate to say it like that. It pains me to say that on this, but that's been, you're talking about something that's been my passion. Getting people to.
Well, it's a powerful and a potentially an incredibly effective tool. Not to suggest it wasn't abused in some cases, but used properly, you get multiples in terms of private investment for every dollar of public investment. And there's lots of great examples of that. San Diego being one of them, Oakland being another example. So anyway, it is what it is. It forces a different kind of discipline on projects that are being done in urban areas. But it's hard because you can't put all of the burden on the private developer to do all of the things that are necessary to make a district. And my interest has always been about districts. It's never been about a single project. I don't think, it's responsible for developers to only get focused on what's within their property line. They really need to think more broadly and understand that their role is to be both instigator for their own projects, but also to figure out ways that you can bring other talent to the table, because any great place it's got to be holistic, right? It has to be a sum of a lot of different elements that need to come together. And it's rare that one developer can do all of that. Actually, great cities are made by multiple people with multiple perspectives and multiple design ideas. So it shouldn't be one master plan, one master developer. That's, I think, the wrong way to think about how development should happen.
And, we're talking about also the Oscars. What I love about your creation at Ovation is now called is simply that it really does bring people together, and by its design. And
Yeah.
but every time I'm there for the Oscars, the first thing that I feel is excitement.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
know,
feel the same thing. Yeah, as a kid growing up and being wowed by the Oscars and by the film business, it was a very special experience for me to get a chance to build the place, to build the stage where the Oscars are held, and to do it in a way that honored Hollywood. That for me was quite profound. And part of the success of the project was that we had a really great narrative arc, right? It started at the Hollywood Roosevelt, and it traveled it all over, but the Oscar was coming back to Hollywood, and I think people really understood the importance of the symbolic importance and the actual importance of that, and I think it's been a great thing for Hollywood. And one of the things that I experienced when I was first starting the project, I spent a ton of time just walking the boulevard, just absorbing it, and I'd so often see people's facial expression, and it was disappointment. I really felt it. I felt like, man, we can do better. People come here wanting something special, and they're turned away. It's such a thin experience, and it's almost as if, as Angelinos, we had just sort of carved off Hollywood. We'd sort of started because we didn't want to acknowledge we'd done such a poor job with it. And I go now and I see families, I see people taking pictures, I see them smiling, and they're having a nice experience. They're going to have a good memory, and that's meaningful to me. And I one of the things that I really value in my work is that it creates environments where there's the opportunity for joy.
yes,
And so I think to me that that kind of makes it worthwhile. It's hard, damn. I mean, it was hard negotiating with the Academy. It was hard doing that project, but
what was the most?
when I I'm sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, what was the part that was difficult? You said it was hard with them. Was
Well,
it
AMPAS is not an easy organization to work with. They are used to having their own way, and we gave them a lot of leverage, probably too much leverage, and
Wow.
and so we ended up basically saying to them, "Well, we're going to build you a Ferrari," and they said, "Great, fabulous, we can't wait." And we said, "And we're thinking about this color red for the interior," and they looked, and they'd say, "It's not exactly the right color red, think about this color of red for the interior." So there was a lot of that kind of them deciding, hey, we're smart people. We've made great movies and we've won Oscars, and we think we know pretty much everything about everything, including how to go about developing this project. So there was some frustrating moments there. I heard a little bit of an interview the other day with Bruce Davis. Bruce Davis was the executive director that I worked with, and he was there for 30 years. He just wrote a book. I haven't read the book, but I've got to believe that there's some comments there about, the challenge of trying to herd his board of governors to be able to make decisions in a timely way on the theater, because, the show obviously is their economic engine.
Yes.
It has been for many, many, many years. And over and above that, it is deeply meaningful for the members of the Academy, particularly for the members of the board, the board of governors, deeply meaningful to do a show that highlights the best of their industry, and so they got into it. Some of that's good, some of it was a pain in the ass, but ultimately I think we delivered a great product, and I love the show. I love watching the show. I think the show looks great there. And it's been fun to watch how different producers approach the show and utilize the space differently. But we built them a space that was really exactly what they want in terms of number of seats, and it's really it's a theater that created the opportunity for televising the show in ways that they'd never had before, and so they love that.
Was it designed? Let me ask a dumb question. Was it designed with the red carpet in mind? What I mean by that, the red carpet is its own entity that's built, but but it looks like from the start it was designed to have this, when the red carpet is completed, this tunnel that comes in and you go right up to it. You can't quite see where the theater is, but you got to go in and find it. And when you're going in to look for it, you got retail over here. You got the grill over there. I've got, it seems almost like that whole almost Cinderella's castle, Disney carrot and a stick kind of approach. Am I right about that?
Well, it was definitely orchestrated. David Rockwell was the architect for the theater, and he's a brilliant architect and has done a tremendous amount of hospitality and entertainment design. And so, he storyboarded it and worked with the Academy to go through the sequence of arrival, drop off, how the red carpet is arrayed, going through the gate, right? The portal, which oftentimes has a curtain of some kind. And then the move that goes, go through that hallway, which it gets transformed on Oscar night, right? You don't see any of the shops, and it becomes this beautiful processional that leads up the stair and then into the theater. So all of that we thought was really important, because this is about not just the experience of the viewer or the person sitting in the stand, but the experience of the person coming to the show. And from the Academy's perspective, that's really what mattered. They knew that ABC would figure out how to do the show, but they really wanted their invited guests, who they believe are the most important people on the planet. They wanted those invited guests to have an extraordinary experience. And so they really looked at it from that perspective, both the arrival into the theater and the ease of being able to get drinks or get to your seat, or, mingling during breaks. All of those things were thought about. The backstage, of course, was their ideal, right? They laid it out in detail. They told us how much, green room space and wing space and fly space and how deep the stage, all of that. And it's very specific to the show because it's a big show. So it demands a lot of set changes, which means you need to have a very deep stage, and you need to be able to load from certain places and fly big objects. And so it was just a lot of technical stuff that had to be done right. So we had a great group of consultants working with AMPUS to make sure that we were doing something that would be around, we hope, for the next 100 years.
Yeah, and deservedly so. What I love about it, it's a small thing. Being able to go from the hotel and get coffee, and then go up the elevator, go up 2 flights, and go over, and then go right back to the red carpet. And I could do that in 4 minutes. I mean, I've been there, timed it out, right? It's just a beautiful place to host that event. And then, by the way, hey, on the way, you might see Tom Cruise, or you might see Ryan Seacrest, or you might see, or you might see, you get the idea. And then that place at the hotel becomes the unofficial gathering place. I call that the real place for the Oscars.
Well, they had never had a situation where they had a hotel attached to a theater before. So they loved that. For them, that was really great, because it allowed their guests to be able to be in a comfortable place right next door. And as you say, in 3 or 4 minutes, they could get from hair, makeup, and then they could be in the theater. So, it was a big benefit for the hotel, obviously, but a nice benefit for the guests of the show as well.
And so, I want to, before we shift gears and talk about Idea San Diego, I want to congratulate you on it. I mean, I think it is one of the great wonders of the world in terms of development. I think Jimmy Kimmel gives it a great bit of love every night on his program.
He does. Across the street. We love that.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to Oscar Sunday. Got a Best Picture idea? Are you following the Oscars in that way, or?
I follow it every year. I see all the films. I mean, I think Oppenheimer's probably locked, this year. But there were a lot of good films this year, and coming out of COVID, I'm really pleased that there's been a lot of great films that people are going back to the theater, going back to movies. I grew up and the movie theater was always a magical place, and now my kids, they watch stuff on screens, and they're kind of screen agnostic. But there is something about seeing the movie on the big screen that to me is an irreplaceable thing. And it was something you said that also resonated with me. Films have always been gathering places for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And we, in our society, it's harder and harder to find places where everybody can come gather, where everybody feels comfortable and everybody feels safe, and we can have a shared experience. And I think our society has been damaged by the decrease in the number of spaces that enable that sort of experience. So I've always hoped that our projects, and certainly Holllywood and Highland is a place where everybody can come. Everybody's welcome. You don't have to spend any money. You can just come hang out. You can just come look at the Holllywood sign, or just enjoy people watching. And maybe there's a moment of serendipity where a star goes by. Who knows, right? That's sort of the paying off the Hollywood experience. The dream that you're going to be able to be in the movie, that you can actually feel that energy.
The human experience. You said something, I think, in a recent interview, that loneliness was the problem that we all face today because of our technology.
It's epidemic, yeah, and then it's becoming worse in my experience. And
Yeah.
you know, I think it's and not just as people get older. I think we're becoming more insular. You know, we're becoming more focused on, you know, on our phones, and you know, and rather than interacting with each other.
Yep.
And there's just nothing beats that human connection. You know, there's some chemical thing that happens when you're with people and you're interacting with people. There's something that happens in the theater. I mean, watching a comedy in a theater where everybody else is laughing is a very different experience than watching it online. It just is, right? Watching music in a theater live, or whether it's, you know, a film, it's very different than watching it even, you know, if you're with friends. So I do think it's important. One of the responsibilities we have as developers is to make places that enable that kind of interaction to happen. And we ought to be thinking very intentionally about the moves that we make that increase people's desire to want to get out and be with other people, and have that be a satisfying and a fulfilling experience. I think about that with every project that I do. And I know most of my cohorts think about it too, you know, because if you fall in love with a place, you're going to spend more time there. If you spend more time there, you're more likely to, you know, bring family and friends. And, you know, that's what makes successful places is we fall in love with places, right? We feel somehow that it speaks to us at a very elemental level. So I think, you know, we should be, as developers, we should be really focused on how do you make those places, how do you create those environments that really speak to people at a very, you know, at a gut level.
Oh, hey, I'm curious. Was it any conversation about actually bringing the red carpet into the structure rather than having it built as it is, you know, temporarily?
Well, we tried to do it symbolically. When you walk through the corridor, you see all the best movie winners, right?
Yeah.
That are on the columns, and that was a way to give people the sense of sort of the history. Well, I wanted when you walk through that space, you know that there's something magical that happens there every year. So we didn't think about having a literal red carpet, but we wanted to create the feeling of that red carpet. Now, we always knew, because we had done a ton of work with the Academy, making sure we really understand how the sequence, we always knew that the arrival was going to happen out on the street, right? Needed to happen out on the street because you needed to put the bleachers out there, and, you know, sometimes you have weather, and so you have to create, you know, you tented, and, you know, the cars have to be able to get there in a certain way. So we knew that the primary arrival experience would be outdoors. But people would then go indoors, right? Which they do. They then go, but we wanted, when our guests arrived, not guests for the show, but guests that are coming to the project, we wanted them to feel as if, just for a moment, you know, they sort of imagine, oh, you know, this is my Oscar moment. This is my chance to arrive and you know, and walk the same walk, you know, that Tom Cruise and the other stars walk. So
Yeah.
I don't know if we accomplished that completely, but at least that we, you know, that was a thought that we had, that we wanted to have not just the one day a year that had that Oscar magic, but that it would also occur 364 days a year.
It does. I have 3 different videos where I actually take that walk with the camera, and you just get goosebumps. I mean, it's, you know, if it's such a thing as structure producing excitement, right?
Yeah.
Expectation, yours are better than anybody else's, I think. You know,
I appreciate that. Well, I'm glad it worked for you. I hope it worked for us, some of the other guests that are coming there as well.
Yeah. Hey, folks, keep this in mind. Oscar Sunday. Now, I want to ask you about 2 other projects. First of all, along the way to IDEA, there was a project competition we're involved in for the sports district, the sports area. And Stan Kroenke was the eventual winner, but it looks like they have a controversy regarding affordable housing, which gets to, you know what I mean? What's going on with that, if you don't mind, you know, talking about that for a second?
It's a long and for me, sad tale. Zenny, it's one of the few projects I've ever been involved with that actually lost it twice. Right, the first time we completed. This was 2020. We competed against Brookfield, and this is for people who don't know, it's a 47-acre site owned by the city of San Diego. It's where the current sports arena is, and the city's owned it for many, many years. And the sports arena was built in 1966. It's way past its useful life, and they wanted not just a redevelopment of the site, but also redevelopment of the arena, either substantial redevelopment or a new one. And it's just in an area called the Midway. And the Midway district has a height limit on it. You can't go above 30 feet. And that's true of really everything in San Diego that's west of the 5 freeway. And it makes a ton of sense for La Jolla and Pacific Beach, Mission Beach. It doesn't make a lot of sense for Midway because there's no ocean views there. But when the ordinance was being drafted that created this 30-foot height limit back in 1972, they decided, well, for simplicity, we're going to make it west of the 5 freeway. Well, Midway sits west of the 5 freeway. But as a result of this 30-foot height limit, Midway is a mess. It's got fast food places and strip malls and auto body, and there's just never been enough you can't build enough density to actually build quality development there. So it ends up being kind of lowest common denominator. So this sports arena, which essentially is a dump, the current sports arena, is surrounded by a bunch of very indifferent development. Anyway, the city's been trying for years, decades, to redevelop it. So they came out with an RFP in early in 2020. COVID hits. We put a team together and we pursued it. We put a great plan together, but we lost to Brookfield. Brookfield's huge, multi-billion-dollar company, and they, they had a great arena partner on their project, and so they were selected. Problem was that the city did not follow what's called the Surplus Lands Act, which means Surplus Lands Act. So which says that if the city or municipality has surplus lands, they first must offer it to affordable housing developers because there's affordable housing crisis in California. City of San Diego said, "Oh no, that didn't apply to us because we weren't selling the land; we were leasing the land." And
what a collapse!
The state said, "Well, we don't care. It's a distinction without a difference because it's a long-term lease. It's the lessee was going to be the beneficial owner. You needed to offer it to the affordable housing community." So they went back and forth. Finally, the state said, "Look, we're going to make it real simple. If you end up going forward with Brookfield, you're going to pay huge fines. You're never going to see any profit from this deal. So you ought to rethink it." Well, when Brookfield was selected, Kevin Faulconer was the mayor of San Diego.
Yeah, I know Kevin. Yeah.
At the end of 20 and beginning of 21, Todd Gloria became the mayor, right? And so all of this back and forth with the city and the state really was happening more in 21 and not so much in 20. And finally, Todd Gloria's administration said, "Hey, this feels like a layup to us. Why don't we just start the whole thing over again and offer it to the affordable housing community? And, we'll just blame it on Faulconer for having screwed it up," which is what they did.
Good idea.
Why not? Right. So they then brought the project back out again, but now under the auspices of Surplus Lands Act. So they offered it to the affordable housing community. So we put another team together led by an affordable housing developer. Brookfield competed and some other people competed. Long story short, we lost again. We were shortlisted, but we ended up losing again to a group that did not have Stan Kroenke when they were selected. Stan Kroenke came on board about 4 months after that team got selected because that team did not have the financial wherewithal to do that project, which we knew. So they got obviously a guy who's got a huge financial wherewithal and is very interested in arenas. And they were brought to the table by one of the members of this team, which was called Legends. And Legends was the development manager on the project up in Inglewood, the football stadium.
Yeah.
So
Legends is partly Jerry Jones's outfit too, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what his participation is, but anyway, Legends was one of the team members. There was a group called Zephyr. Mm-hmm. They had several team members. They had an affordable housing lead, but the city of San Diego has, in my opinion, been unrealistic about how this deal is going to happen, because in the real world, you start with a program and you have a perspective on what you're going to do, but that thing, it evolves, right? As you get into it and the market changes and financing changes. But when they selected the Zephyr Legends team, they said, "You cannot change one thing about this plan, or we're going to haul you back to council and we're going to, I don't know what they were going to do, but they threatened to take the project away and they would go back out to bid again, I guess." Well, of course the project changes, right? That's just the nature of the thing. So I don't know where it stands right now, but I will say that having done several very large-scale public-private deals with the city of New York and the city of Los Angeles, the key is having a great public sector partner. It's not how motivated the private side is. We're always motivated to try to figure out a way to make it work. But what you need is a very motivated, very creative public sector partner who gets what it really means, what it, what the realities are.
Right.
Making a project happen, right? You've been there,
Right.
and is willing to be creative in order to enable the project to get built.
You said that because I happened to look at the project and what they were saying, and they said something I understand. They said, look, interest rates are too high for us to do affordable. Yeah. We have to do luxury. Okay, fine. So to me, when I hear that, I think, okay, well, we'll fill in the gap, right? So it'll pencil out. Simple. Right. But David, that simple thing is what cities don't want to do in California. Well, Oakland, they want to soak. They say, oh, you're a billionaire, you have to pay for the whole thing. And I tell anybody who won't listen and will listen, hey, you know what? No billionaire spends their own money on projects to lose money.
Yeah. There's a misconception out there, right? There's a misconception that if a developer is well-heeled or they have equity, a lot of equity, that they're willing to do whatever it takes, in order to get, well, first of all, no developer puts up all the equity for a project, right? The bulk of the equity has come from institutions, and institutions are extremely hard-headed. Yep. And institutions have lots of options. They can invest in stocks, they can invest in bonds, they can, invest in solar projects, they can do damn near anything they want to do. They don't have to invest in real estate. If they invest in real estate, there has to be a reason that project makes, on a risk-adjusted basis, that project makes sense for them, right? Yep. They're not typically interested in the social benefit of the project. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a pension fund that's even asked that question. Nope. They're interested in what is my return, when can I exit, and and why? Because I've got to go to an investment committee and I've got to justify this deal, right? So if it is not competitive on a market-adjusted basis, you're not going to get your project built, right? All the sweet talk in the world is not going to do it. So if there is a major gap in the project that doesn't get you to whatever the market-adjusted return needs to be, the project's not going to happen. It's just not. So it's that's just the sort of brutal reality that the public sector has to understand and embrace if they want a project to happen.
See, that's what I'm getting. We did. Yeah. Like I would never step into a project without making my own spreadsheet, without making my own model. And so when the city hired me back in, this is 87 out of Cal, I made something called the Area Redevelopment Economic Model and wound up being able to use it for any redevelopment project in California because I could dial it in, right? But that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be, and somebody able to say to you, hey, look, I get where you guys are coming from. Here's what we can provide. Oh, and by the way, we might have to change the boundaries so you can capture more tax increment. And the beauty today is, we used to be saying, well, they would say to us, like the Board of Equalization, you cannot do that. You cannot target these areas. And we would say, well, how are we supposed to get this project done in the right fashion? Now, guess what? You don't have to worry about it. Okay? But the cities, I have to say, it's the staff that doesn't do the spreadsheets anymore.
Well, there are oftentimes using a consultant, right? They've got a real estate development consultant that they hired, and
this
consultant doesn't really understand what it takes to get the project.
I'm sorry, the consultant comes in. They did this with Howard Terminal with the A's, right? I'm the person that told Dave Cobble, the president, hey, use tax increment finance. He says, you can't use public money. I say, you can. Here's legislation. He had his own design. Lance, okay? Then guess what? The city drags its feet and never implements it. Okay,
right.
we get a whole political turnover. I'm thinking, oh man,
it's very hard for the public to understand how deals really come together, and it's as a consequence of that, it's very hard for politicians, even very well-meaning, smart, diligent politicians, to do large-scale real estate projects because they're messy. Right. Yes. And they're at the front end, they're extraordinarily complicated and difficult to explain. And all the crap that happens usually happens up front. And, most politicians say, I don't need it, because even if I get all the elements to come together, I'm not going to be at the ribbon cutting because I'm going to get termed out. So, this project is going to take 6, 8, 10 years. Some other guy's going to be there taking credit for it. And he had nothing to do with it. I'm the one who had to deal with all the crap. So they're not really very good incentives for mayors to step up and make the tough decisions that are necessary to do large-scale projects, which is unfortunate.
And you put it on term limits, ranked choice voting, and in Oakland's case, our strong mayor system. Because what happens, we implemented strong mayor, Jerry did, And I calculated since then, our chief administrative officers lasted only an average of 2.1 years, and that was it.
Yeah.
So when they get fired or they leave because they think their guy's not going to get or gal's not going to get reelected, what happens? All the staff leaves with them. So you get a brain like that, you know.
Which is horrible because you lose all institutional memory. It's just so much about relationships and trust. And you know, I became very attuned to the differences in the reward system between the private and the public side and the private side. You know, the public sector guys, they don't get any big bonus if a project happens. They don't have an economic incentive in a project happen. They have to be incredibly diligent and motivated and inspired by the mission and the desire to want to do something that's really going to benefit that community. And they also have to be confident they're not going to get embarrassed. They're not going to end up being in a headline, you know, and it's going to lose them their job. You know, there's a lot, and that's happened. And so people are very, very concerned about it. So the transparency, the willingness of the private partner to be fully disclosive about what their economics look like. And, you know, you can't replace that. You just cannot replace that. And when you have a lot of turnover with the public sector partner, it just, you know, you just keep wondering who am I negotiating with? You know, who's going to be around that actually understands what we're trying to accomplish? So it's made it extremely challenging to do these large scale public private deals. And I'm not sure today, even given how much the Midway team has invested in their pride, even given they've got Stan Kroenke, you know, who knows? Will they get it to the finish line? I certainly hope so. I mean, it's a really important project for the city of San Diego. There are lots of reasons why it should happen, but it's hard. It's just it's a heavy lift, and it's going to be hard to get it done.
Since I'm in love with San Diego. I've covered Comic-Con there since 2010. What's going to happen with Comic-Con? How come it doesn't have its own home in the convention center better? I mean, you know this better than I do because you live there. But I love Comic-Con.
You know, they've been trying. City's been trying for decades to do an expansion of the convention center. They thought they had it done, but you know, they've been in basically a fight for the last I don't know how many years about whether or not the 65% vote that they got was sufficient to be able to actually sell the bonds to do this multi-$100 million expansion. So, but even if it got approved now, it'd still be 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years before it's completed. But you know, Comic-Con doesn't want to leave, but you know, because they're identified with San Diego, and then they have a museum in Balboa Park. It's Comic-Con Museum, so they're invested in the community, but it's not ideal. And the convention center probably does need to be expanded. I wouldn't say that necessarily about every convention in the country, but San Diego happens to be one of the top 5 convention markets in the country, and an expansion of the convention center is warranted based on the book of business that is out there right now. And so, again, it's one of those things you think, well, it seems like it ought to happen, but I don't know. I don't know if it's going to or not. It's gotten tied up in the courts. And this question of, well, whether a citizens initiative only needs 50% plus one, or whether they need 2/3, because that's been batted back and forth between various different levels of the court system in the state of California.
Let's talk about Idea
District. Yeah. So going back, gosh, almost 15 years ago now, I decided, I've lived in San Diego. At that point, I'd lived in San Diego for 15 years, and I hadn't done anything in San Diego. I've been traveling all over the country doing the projects. I thought, well, why don't I try to do something in my backyard? So I hooked up with a guy named Pete Garcia, and we decided that we wanted to do something downtown, and we wanted to do something that would be transformational, because that's really the stuff that I've done that's been most satisfying for me. And in order to do that, we needed to pick a site that had the ability to have large scale impact. So we didn't pick a site; we picked a district, and we ended up focusing on the Upper East Village, which is the 35 city blocks, 90 acres. It's bounded by Market Street, 12th Street, the street where the trolley is, City College on the north, and the freeway, 94 freeway on the east. And it was the part of San Diego, downtown San Diego, that was the least developed, because essentially the market stopped in 2008, right? There'd been a ton of development that had happened over on the west side near the water, and there was a ton that happened at Petco. So you had this east to west migration development, you had the south to north by migration, but it stopped in this this Upper East Village, that was a quadrant that hadn't yet been developed. So when we first looked at it, 25 of 35 blocks were either completely undeveloped or underdeveloped. We thought, well, this is big opportunity, right? And redevelopment was in place at the time, right? This is the 2010. So we thought, this is perfect. And so what we said was, well, if we created a place that was primarily about trying to generate jobs, it was really an economic development motivation, what would that look like? And there was a thing happening around the world there that came to be called innovation districts. We thought, well, gosh, San Diego's an innovative place. Why don't we think about trying to do an urban innovation district? What would that look like? So we did a bunch of research and, landed on 4 or 5 locations around the world in Seoul, Korea, and 22 Barcelona, and the east side of London, and places that were incubating businesses and creating the kind of ecosystem, the fertile soil where businesses could grow. And that was principally about creating an environment that drew the talent that launched those businesses, right? Because that's really the key. It's about appealing to that young, highly educated cohort that in their late 20s, early 30s are starting businesses. What appeals to them? What are the, what's the vibe? What are the factors that would cause them to want to locate? So we'd study that, and we decided that we were going to build this district on 4 pillars: innovation, design, education, and art. Those being sort of the essential elements. And happily, when you put first letter of those 4 together, you come with idea. So we ended up calling it Idea District. And it was, I don't know whether to call it foolhardy or audacious. Let's call it audacious, because we started it with no money, and we owned no land, and we had no tenants, right?
Huh.
You wouldn't think that's a great way to undertake a large scale development project, but interestingly, being unburdened by all of the things that typically are part of large scale master plan development turned out to be a blessing, because it freed us up to ask much more interesting questions. And we could say, well, what would be the kinds of moves that we could make from a district perspective that would create long-term value for this community, right? Rather than asking, how do we maximize the value of this single piece of real estate, we asked, what kinds of things would maximize value for everybody and create prosperity for everybody? And it led to a whole different kind of conversation with property owners and with business owners and with the arts community and with the design community and with government and philanthropy. Because we were not master developers, we couldn't impose anything. We became more like community organizers, frankly. So we didn't cast a master plan. We created what we called a master vision. And what we created was a vision for this long-term district, which we then subsequently started to collaborate with developers and tried to implement this notion of Idea District. And parts of it have been successful. We're now fast forward, 14, 15 years. Parts have been successful. A lot of it hasn't, because we really wanted to try to create business. We wanted to create jobs, because downtown San Diego, although had been very successful under redevelopment, it was exclusively residential. It was 20,000 residential units and hotels and hospitality and 0 net job growth. So San Diego had been growing dramatically, but that was all around UC San Diego and around Qualcomm. None of it had happened in downtown. And our hypothesis was, unless downtown San Diego starts to become a place where young entrepreneurs want to go and companies then follow those young entrepreneurs, downtown San Diego is going to become like Santa Barbara. It's going to become a nice tourist place, but largely irrelevant from a business standpoint. And we thought that would be a tragedy and a missed opportunity. And so we needed to bring intention to the notion of job creation. That's how we thought about it. And so, we had a lot of good ideas and a lot of energy, and a lot of good people working with us. We did a project called Idea One, which was mixed use with some commercial and retail and 295 residential units, a bunch of other good residential projects. There's been in planning, 2 million square feet of office space for a number of years. Kilroy bought a site and is going to do 1 million square feet in theory. But, it's been hard. And then COVID happened.
Yeah.
Nobody's building office space right now. And maybe it was a good thing, I'm looking back on it now. Maybe it was a good thing that there wasn't 2 million square feet of office space built, because it'd be sitting empty.
Yeah,
So many people who are working from their home or their apartment. And so we do think there's a bunch of entrepreneurial energy that's happening within Idea District, but it hasn't been the job generator. So from that metric, the project has not been successful. It's been successful for some other metrics. We convinced UC San Diego to come into Idea District. So they created a project called Park and Market, which has been there for about 2 years. 60,000 square foot UC San Diego campus, urban campus. And they do classes, and they do a lot of arts activities and cultural activities. And it's a way for them to connect to urban and southern part of San Diego, 30 minutes south from La Jolla campus. And also there's a trolley. This is not coincidental. There's a trolley that runs right outside Park and Market, runs through Idea District, and goes all the way to the UC San Diego campus, right?
Oh, wow.
Where it has other stops. It's about a 25-minute trolley ride. So this is an instance where a public investment in infrastructure had a direct impact on the value of all the surrounding real estate, and has been, I think, it's been a great thing that, that helped to spark some of the development that has happened in Idea District. There's been a ton of development, just mostly it's been residential. There was supposed to be a park that was built. In fact, it was the centerpiece of our master vision. It was supposed to be started in 2010, 2011. Well, when redevelopment happened, there was no money. So it is under construction now. It's just 10 years late, right? So it will spark a lot of good development around edges, because that's what happens with parks. But that was a disappointment. So, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to go tell you how great it all is, because it's not. Development business is excruciatingly difficult, and even with the best intentions and you make all the right decisions, sometimes things just don't fall your way, because so much of what happens in our business is a function of timing. The business, they say the business is location. It's not. It's location, execution, and timing. And of those three, timing is the one that's the biggest determinant on value creation. And sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. But it's a fool's errand. To try to time anything in our business is a fool's errand, because there's just so many things that are out of your control. Certainly during the entitlements process, you really don't know when a project's going to come on stream.
I'm curious, as we, put all this together, and out of respect for your time too, I'm concerned that we have this big bugaboo out there called sea level rise.
Yeah.
And I know we have a plan for it in Oakland. We haven't addressed it. I gave a presentation, Joint Powers Authority in Coliseum, as to how to set up EIFD we're talking about. And my reason was so we have money to build the sea level rise mitigations that we planned for the last 15 years. But I don't sense, and this is something I think we need to buttonhole Gavin about, the governor. I don't sense there's this urgency to do anything about it. I'm happy to be wrong.
It's an interesting problem. I know a little bit about it. My son actually is getting his PhD in sociology at UCLA, and his thesis topic is the politics of sea level rise. So, fascinating, right?
A copy of it.
Right. Well, he's not done yet, but he's working on it. But he's grappling with exactly the issue you're talking about: is where's the urgency? What's the policy perspective? And the reason that it's been a challenge is, and unlike a lot of socials, this is one that falls disproportionately on people of means, because a lot of the problem has to do with people who have the $10 million houses along the coast, and they're smart and they know how to organize and they know how to apply political pressure. And so what you think might be reasonable policy prescriptions for dealing with sea level rise oftentimes don't happen, right? So I don't know where it's going to go, but I think he's been dealing a lot with the Coastal Commission and trying to understand it from the state's perspective. How is the state dealing with it? But failing that, cities are trying to take matters into their own hands. Oceanside has commissioned a big study to figure out how it can replenish its sand. Because a lot of coastal communities live and die based on how much sand they have, what kind of beach they have. Yeah. Right. But you can't, you can't do this on a piecemeal basis, because everything that you do ends up impacting your neighbors. Right. So it really does need to have policy prescriptions. It is undoubtedly going to happen, right? It's not a question about whether sea level is going to rise. Certainly there are questions about how quickly it's going to happen, what impacts are going to happen, but it's going to happen. And so this, the approach that a lot of people have taken, which is, but it's not going to happen to me, right?
Right.
That's just not real. That's
happened to you.
Right. No, it is going to happen to you. And there are techniques, obviously, to deal with it. But we need to kind of step back and think more broadly about, as a society, how are we going to deal with this? I'm working on a project right now in Del Mar. We're rethinking the master plan for the Del Mar Fairgrounds. And sea level rise is a massive issue there, right? Not only that, but you also have the inundation from the San Diego River, which creates a fascinating environmental opportunity challenge. My perspective on this is I think that we ought to really embrace sea level rise, not try to pretend that it's not going to happen, and then start to understand what are the implications of that, right? As builders, as developers, as a society, how do we start thinking about coastal environments if you really understand the extent to which sea level rise is going to change the coastline? And we want to be thinking 50, 100 years out and creating plans that recognize inundation is going to happen in certain places. By the way, that's not a negative thing. If you look at it in Del Mar, if 25% of that area becomes inundated, it creates more interesting water edges, and water's magic, right? So you can use it. So it's not always a bad thing. It's just something that I think has to be realistically addressed if you're going to be doing good planning.
And have a better future too. Hey, by the way, NFL coming back to San Diego, you think?
No, not in the short term. I mean, certainly not. Spanos does not come back. Although I think almost all of the teams that have lost a franchise have eventually gotten another team. So I think it's sometime in the future, San Diego may get another team, but there is nothing but bad feelings towards Spanos. And, I don't think he's doing very well in LA. Who knows? I mean, I don't want to wish anybody ill, but it was an odd decision to move to LA with the Rams already moving there. And, he had a very, very committed, solid fan base, but he, could get somebody to put up $1 billion to build a stadium for him.
Yeah, I think he was
right.
I think Mayor Faulkner really let him down. And I'm not saying Dean didn't make some mistakes himself. He made a lot of them. Yeah. I met Dean when I was trying to bring the Super Bowl to Oakland. It was my first NFL cocktail party in '99. Yeah. And now I cover the league, But I think the real problem was that Dean didn't give them a chance, and they didn't structure something that was in mutual interest of both parties.
Yeah, it's not clear to me that he ever really wanted to stay in San Diego. And if you really talk to people who know him well and understood what he was trying to achieve, it felt as if he was trying to create a scenario where the city would tell him to go stuff it so that he could then go back to the NFL owners and say, see, I told you, they don't really want me here. I need to go to LA.
It was some of that. I think Dean wanted to be embraced more than he was. What happened was that whole vote that didn't go away, that crushed him. And
but I was on the other side of it, and what he was asking for was preposterous.
Right.
The city and the county put a fairly aggressive deal. They put $400 million on the table, but it would have meant he would have to build it where the Qualcomm. And he said, no, absolutely not. It has to be downtown. And it was, basically in the southern part of Idea District. We said, well, gosh, this site seems pretty small to do everything you want to do. And, how are you going to activate it? You're going to have, 12, 14 games. And what's going to happen the rest of the time? And then you've got this huge high wall, and it's very unfriendly from an urban standpoint. So,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he was serious and maybe he wanted to do it, but boy, he earned an enormous amount of ill will.
It was more like, I'm going to take my ball and go here, and I'm going to go in the quarter, and I'm going to sit for a while and figure it out, because that's literally what he's doing. He was really hurt. He didn't get what he wanted. I don't mean to say this derisively because I like him as a person, and I know him as a very good acquaintance, friend. Well, friend, because I know him on a first name basis. What the hell? I like Dean, and I felt sorry for the way it turned out. I think there are a lot of people that I think there should be another go at it, because I know he's not happy in Stan's building. It's a nice building.
He wanted to own, right? That was the whole point. Was just, he could have something he could own.
He wanted his own country. I mean, because the way we would do it today is he wouldn't actually own it. Say the city and county of San Diego would own it, but he would get all the revenue. That's the NFL thing now, right? He get all the other right. That's really what he wants. But I'm saying beyond that, what he wants is something that he can say that's uniquely San Diegan, right? And he doesn't have anything like that. I mean, I keep saying San Diego Chargers to this day. It's hard for me to just mouth out. You know, it doesn't. It's like, what? I can't do it. You know, I can't. You know, so he's having a hard time. I mean, he's got people come to the games, sure. NFL football is prized, as we know, but if he had the right deal in San Diego, I know in a heartbeat he'd take it.
Yeah, I know that. Well, they got a new coach, so I wish him well. Listen, Zenny, I got to run. I got some stuff I need to do on this.
Yeah, have you back. Yeah.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the chance to chat with you.
And thank you for all that you've done for San Diego, for California, and for the world, and for the Oscars in particular, because the Oscars would not be the Oscars without what you've done. And that's a fact. You know,
I hope that everybody watches the show on Sunday, enjoys the show. I'm sure the theater will look great. I'm sure the project will look great, and that always makes me happy.
Definitely. Hey, stick around in the background, folks. NFL Combine later. We got some other stuff going on. Subscribe to Zenny62 on YouTube, but that ends this broadcast. Dave, you don't have to move a muscle.
All right.